And welcome to Overtime, brought to you by Kingscast at www.kingscast.net. I'm Keith Korneluk.
And I'm Chris Kalzewski.
And we are not back from Staples Center. We are not on the roof. It's the summer. Kings are out of the playoffs. And we are doing our second annual Media Roundtable.
That's right. We put together some of the brightest minds in Los Angeles covering hockey, covering Kings hockey. And what an assemblage of talent that we have today for this roundtable. It was a fantastic experience. This is part 1, episode 108.
Enjoy.
I'm Dennis Bernstein, I write for the fourth period.
I'm Charles E. Smith Jr. of Inside Sports. Inside Sports was created in 1994. We are changing the world one sport at a time. Find us at officialinsidesports.com.
Gan Matsuda, FrozenRoyalty.net.
I'm Matt Wright. I'm the editor-in-chief of YouForMySeat.com, and I'm also an NHL writer at Pro Hockey Talk for NBC Sports.
Dave Joseph, morning sports center anchor, 710 ESPN Radio, and hockey analyst, ESPNLA.com.
Hey everybody, I'm John Moncrief from Inside Sports, which you can see right here. I'm the creative director and the co-host of, and also I'm the Kings beat writer for Examiner.com.
I'm John Hovind, aka the Mayor from mayorsmanor.com.
All right, let's quiet on the set here from the Peanut Gallery. Charles E. Smith Jr. Okay. All right, so for those of you that were there in the locker room after Game 6 when the Kings went out of the playoffs, what was the overall temperament there? What was being said? What was different from last year?
I didn't see much difference than last year.
Yeah.
There was acceptance. So I think the vets were a little more upset, but guys like Doughty and Simmons, they accepted it, and I don't think they were that upset about it. I really don't. I didn't see, John Quick is a very emotional kid, and he took it to heart, but I didn't see, we'll get him next year. Wait until next year. And that's the attitude I think I saw in the room, which is not troubling, but that has to change, right? The mentality has to change. It's getting there. I think they were happy last year to be in the playoffs. This year, they had him. Everybody knows it. From the general manager down, they had him in Game 3. They let him off the hook. They went up losing the series, but it wasn't this, sullen, desperate team that really thought they could have had this series and didn't. I didn't get that sense in the room.
Well, the veterans were.
Yeah.
The veterans.
Yeah,
a lot of the veterans felt that. I think if you poll the veterans, I think they would all say this was the year they were supposed to advance. They were supposed to go further than what they did the year before. That didn't happen this year. But you're right. On the younger guys, almost to a man, the younger guys were like, okay, there's next year. And I don't think that sat well with some of the veterans either. I think they kind of saw that, and I think that's going to affect them for next season.
You were there at Fan Fest with us. Drew Doughty said anything less than a conference final.
Yep.
is not going to be a successful season. So if it wasn't, where's the guy standing up and saying it wasn't successful? So there's a ways to go. This is not the Columbus Blue Jackets, on the other hand. All right, I think that when Kings fans watch this, I think there's a lot of good in looking at this. If Kopitar's in the lineup, they win the series. I think a lot of people think that's the case.
So how much of that was the young kids saying, hey, we lost our number one center, what are you going to do?
I don't think that was really it. I do think, though, that Dennis and Dave hit on it.
Although I will say I did spend a good amount of time with Simmons after that game, and he did show he was disillusioned, I thought. At first, maybe not so much, but as he got deeper and deeper in talking with us, he got a little more sullen about things. But he was really the only one of the younger players who struck me that way. Drew Doughty showed me after that game he still has a lot of growing up to do. This past year was definitely a step back for him, especially early in the season, and I think that showed in his attitude after Game 6. He's got some growing up to do for sure. So there's a long way to go with some of these players.
The flip side of that is if you're his age, sorry to interrupt, if you're his age, you kind of look at it and say, here's a pro hockey player at 22, 23 years old, and wouldn't you be doing the same thing if you were his age? I know if that was me and I was making a few $100,000 a year and some guy's making, $1 million something a year, I'd be out every night too. I'd be at the bar, I'd be drinking, I'd be doing whatever. I tried to train when I came in, but how serious do you take it when you're 22, 23 years old? I think there comes a point, maybe you hit 25, 26, and you go, whoa, I got some growing up to do and I got work to do. Not, and I think that's going to come. But I think to lay that on a guy who's that age to say, he's got to be so much better or whatever. I think that's only going to come in time.
But he was the focal point of the team, though, as far as he was meant to anchor the defense. So when you look at the players who achieved that status of Norris Trophy candidate early on, a lot of them, you didn't really see that dip. When you look at the great ones, the Ray Borks of the world, I know they only make Ray Borks one time around. But Doughty, to me, what I saw too was he was competitive, but as I always said, it seems like he needs some beta blockers or something. Because he's excitable. And when you look at that hip check that he missed in the game against San Jose, the overtime game, and allows Logan Couture to go by him, that kind of, to me, is a microcosm of the way his season was. It comes to him in the moment and trying to do a little too much and never quite getting comfortable, and then it turns into a disaster.
Well, the end of season meetings, Terry Murray said Drew had to come into better shape, had to come into camp in better shape, and he even made a reference that he still debates that with Terry, that he was in shape when he came to camp. And if you notice the season, where he fell back was in the first half. The second half, he was much better. Playoffs, not that check on Couture's side. He was pretty good. He was a dominant player in game 2 when they won up there. So I think that he got in better shape. He needs to mature. He definitely does. I mean, he is going to lead this team. I'm not sure he's going to get that big contract this year. They might offer him a 1-year deal, and then maybe after the year, because they got a lot of cap money coming off the year after next. So I don't think you're going to see like a good Duncan Keith contract this offseason. But I think they'll maybe re-up him for 1 or 2, like they did with Jack, and then let him prove himself a little bit more, and then give him the big money once guys like Penner and Smith come off the.
Does he think that he came back a little too early from the concussion that he had in the first half of the season, and that maybe contributed to the fact that he wasn't the same player in the first half that he was in the second half of the year?
I don't think so. I didn't see that at all.
He wasn't good before the concussion.
Yeah.
That was like the 7th game of the year, and I mean, he wasn't ready. It almost looked like he had a sophomore slump a year late, where people talk about a mental thing or whatever, but it's usually a guy fights so hard to get in the NHL in the rookie year. They're prepared, they're in shape. They're Kyle Clifford. They want it. And then there's always that sophomore slump, and they come back a little bit, and it's because they didn't work quite as hard. They get a little more complacent, and I think that he wanted to be an elite kind of defenseman, and then he was a Norris Trophy finalist, the second youngest ever. And I think that what's the cliche? You start believing your own press clippings. I think that it's. I'm the man, he forgets the work that it takes. I mean, that was the thing with Dean Lombardi. They had the agreement. You need to be in shape. You're in shape, we're going to draft you number 2 overall. You can say whatever you want about the offseason, but obviously he wasn't where he needed to be. And it took a long time. The concussion didn't help at all. I think that put him back. But
there's some context here. The guy he competed with last year for the Norris, Duncan Keith, did not have a good season this year either.
Right.
And that's the guy he's mostly linked to because Duncan got the big contract in Chicago. Now when people look at salary caps and slots and stuff like that, they think that Drew's up for a Duncan Keith contract. Up until the playoffs, Keith didn't have a good year. He was hovering at about, plus minus of about 0. So he was open to a lot of criticism for a guy who's a great player, who won a Stanley Cup. So I think in context, in the bigger picture, who would I trade for this guy? Would I trade Stamkos for him? Going back, yeah, maybe, probably.
Well,
but other than that,
maybe, yeah, but
you're looking at this may be the biggest drop-off we've ever had with the 3 Norris Trophy finalists. We had Duncan Keith, Mike Green, and Drew Doughty, and then look at the seasons all 3 of them had this year.
Well, Mike Green didn't even deserve to be a Norris Trophy candidate.
I think there's an Olympic factor that's in there as well. You talked about him not dropping off last year. He was highly motivated to be part of the Olympic team last year.
Right.
So he came into last season with a different mindset probably than he did this year. So that sophomore slump to me makes sense coming in. The 3rd year rather than the 2nd year because of that.
For sure, and I think also with the Olympic, he got a lot more publicity because of the Olympics.
Absolutely.
Where, on the West Coast bias or East Coast bias or whatever. I mean, we knew how good he was. But, I would get into arguments with people on the East Coast, and they're like, well, he's not that great. I mean, watch what he does.
Yeah.
He's out there defensively in the toughest situations. And then they saw what he could do in the Olympics, and it was like, holy crap, he's one of the best defensemen Canada has. Not young. He was one of the best defensemen they had. And I think that kind of went with the 2, where it was like, that catapulted him to the Norris. The conversation.
Well, you can't really reason with the East Coast people because they're the They made Mike Green an all-star.
Yeah, go ahead.
They made Wade Redden an all-star. They made Jay Bomeister an all-star.
All right, let's get back to the realization, though, about Doughty's season. And one of the other things, too, that we noticed during the season, guys, is especially when they were playing the better teams, Vancouver and so forth, there was a lot more physicality aimed at him than there had been in the past. And I think that's something else that he needs to sort of absorb and try to adjust to as he moves forward next season as well, is now he's a target. He's a guy that teams are paying attention to, as opposed to, oh, this guy's got nice numbers and he's somebody we need to. He's now one of the 2 or 3 guys that every team is targeting to try to stop and shut down. And so, and to Charles's point earlier about the fact that sometimes he gets a little emotional at times, and it got away from him with decision making. That's something else I think that he's going to have to work on during the offseason and get better at next year, which I think he will. I think that's also part of the maturation process, is that he's understanding what his body can do, what he needs to do to get better, but also he understands, okay, teams are going to try to attack me and I have to sort of adjust to it without getting myself or my team in trouble as a result of that.
He also has to stay, there has to be a level of maturity when it comes to how he handles the officials too. If you see a lot of times he whines, he complains, he's out. Like he's got it. Like I love the emotion. I love guys yelling at refs, and that's going to happen. But there's got to be a point where you back it off and you say, I got to just skate to the box on this one and take it like a man, and that's it, and not complain about it. The other thing about him, when you watch him, there are some games that he absolutely dominated. He has the skill to dominate when he puts his mind to it, and sometimes he doesn't. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's immaturity or if he gets caught up in his own head or whatever, where he's not taking control. But when he takes control, he can really dominate a game. The other thing was when you saw him in the locker room, especially at the beginning of the season, he was pudgy. I mean, he literally had, and this is from a guy who's a little chubby, right? So I get it. But he had you could see baby fat still on him. Like, man, get in the gym and do something. And I know he's a young guy, but he was pudgy. You could see it. You see all the other guys, and you go, that guy's ripped, he's shredded, that guy. And then you go to Doughty and you go, come on, man. I mean, at some point, someone's got to take him aside and say, you got to work out harder.
Final question, follow-up for this topic is, I compare Stamkos to Doughty, and, is this season enough of a wake-up call for Drew Doughty? Stamkos last season goes to Gary Roberts' camp, gets himself in super shape, learns nutrition. Drew Doughty did, I don't know what, comes into camp, fails his first physical, his fitness test, and, obviously makes that back up. So is his drop in performance enough of a wake-up call for him to come back and be the dominant player?
I don't know if he's mature enough to realize that, but if the Kings want to take the next step next year, it has to be. He has to be one of the go-to guys, him and Kopitar, and quick.
All right, Kings fans, so that concludes this installment of the postseason roundtable. Hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more.
I'm Keith Korneluk.
And I'm Chris Kalazewski.
And thank you for watching Overtime. Bye, Kingscast!